I always respected, even when we disagreed on policy, with your aspirational tone, right? You always talked about our better angels and sort of talked about the hopes and the aspirations of the American people. It seems today that our politics is driven more by anger than anything else. And so I want to start off, as we discuss the state of our disunion, about whether or not there even is space for aspirational politics today.
That's a good question. I hope so, but that's not what works right now. It's not what's succeeding. And I think everyone has a role to play in that. I think let me just start in this particular order, not because I'm blaming them for it. I think they're more a symptom than the cause, but we forget, for example, cable news is a business, and it's a business that makes money based on ratings. The more people watch, the more you can charge for advertising. So if you do stories that are about analyzing the news and giving both points of view and just kind of informing people and allowing people to make an opinion, the ratings tank. Here's what shoots through the charts every time, and that is a conflict story with a good guy and a bad guy and a good side and a bad side, or an anger story where you're telling people that you should be upset because this other half of America is trying to really put it to you. And the ratings shoot up. It's the same in the newsrooms. The Washington Post, all these national papers, their websites, their revenue's driven by clicks. And so the stories that drive clicks are conflict stories. So, we'll pass a bill this week that doesn't solve every problem, but is a bipartisan bill on opioids that won't get a lot of coverage, and frankly won't get a lot of clicks even if you gave it a lot of coverage. I would say that 85% of what we do in the Senate is bipartisan. In fact, I was looking back last week at one of these services that track behavior. I think I have more Democratic co-sponsors, and I have co-sponsored more Democratic bills than any senator both ways. None of that gets a lot of attention. It just doesn't. So I think conflict drives coverage, which then drives politicians. If you want to become a famous politician, let's say you're an obscure member of the House, 435 people over there, you want to get famous overnight, go on TV and say outrageous things, and you're going to get a lot of coverage, and people are going to know who you are. So I think that's part of it. And then adding to all of this is the things that used to regulate us and how we treat one another, those things have broken down. So as an example, people have always disagreed on politics in this country from its very beginning. But they were members of the same PTA, or their kids played in the same schools, or they went to the same schools, played on the same teams, or they were your next door neighbor, or you're a family member or a coworker. And so those things regulated you. You knew people as more than just their political opinion. We have increasingly become homogenized. In essence, people literally get their news from people that tell you you're right and self-select, both in who they socialize with, what websites they go to, who their Facebook friends are, on politics. And so if the only thing you know about another person is a political issue that you feel passionately about, it's easy to dislike that person and to be angry at them. And that has become more true increasingly, to the point where we actually have enclaves developing in America. People actually are moving to places where there are more voters like them and less of the other side. On the other hand, I believe this is still the case. I live in a precinct in West Miami that voted for the president, surrounded by precincts that voted for Hillary Clinton. So no matter where I go, I'm going to be running into people of different points of view. So I think when you point to all that, you realize at the end of the day that one of the things that's caused it, perhaps the biggest thing that's caused it, is that the institutions that used to regulate how we treat one another outside of government, outside of politics, have broken down or frazzled in a way that they no longer regulate how people treat each other in the political realm. And my last point, I remember not long ago, if I was in this room 10 years ago, I'd be here to convince you to care about politics. Now that's all everybody talks about. I mean, politics is everywhere. In movies and entertainment and sports, you can't turn anything on that politics hasn't crept into. So we are increasingly taking away places where we can go to get away from it and interact at a different realm. And that's added to it as well. Other than all that, I think it's going well.
It's going great, yeah. You talk about these echo chambers that we all live in, and it seems like those have taken away the incentives, as you referenced, for political leaders and politicians to actually break outside of their own echo chambers. What sort of incentives can we give or can there be for political figures to listen and reach out and talk to folks from other perspectives?
Well, I think in time, people like that being successful, but that's not the reason you should do it. In essence, you should try to do it, and it's not easy. This is not, by the way, about, because we throw these words around, cooperation, bipartisan, as some sort of therapeutic term to make us feel better. I'm not talking about people not disagreeing. They should, It's important. These are important issues, and there should be both sides argued. That process was created for that. I'm talking about the ability to say, here's the bottom line, okay? You're not going anywhere, and I'm not going anywhere. For the rest of our lives, we're going to share this country. So we're going to have to, by force, figure out a way to work on something we can agree on, or nothing, or it's going to be bad for all of us. That's not only is it common sense, it's what the system was designed to foster. And that's not happening. Eventually, we'll have to do that, or we'll pay a terrible price. I do believe we'll get to that point. But I don't think it's going to be tomorrow or next week. I think we have a ways to go. But I think it just begins by more people trying to do it, understanding this. When you step out and say, all right, look, I have my principles, but I'm going to have to reach out and work with these people on the other side on some issues, your own side will pillory you for selling out, you know, and the other side will say, we don't want you because we disagree with you on 9 other things. That's a problem right now. But eventually, that's got to get broken through, and I think it does start with leadership and setting example, both in politics and in the general and society in general.